My name's Jim McDermot. I was a teacher for a long while and a lecturer in between time. Put a couple of publications out, including a book about the 20s. I'm here in Anad na Foscada, and I want to do a little bit of talk from Twinbrook, this Irish speaking school in which I sit, looking at what the area that is now Colin was like at one time. In recent years, Colin has developed very substantially. There are now 25,000 inhabitants, at least at the last census, 25,000. It is comprised of Poleglass, Twinbrook, Lambeg and Kilwee. As in all areas, there have been great changes in the development of land use in the area and of the types of settlement in the area. The purpose of this short talk is, I hope, to give you some interest in what Colin once looked like, what its immediate surroundings were like, and the reasons it changed. If we look first of all at Francis Jobson's map of 1598, the first thing that becomes apparent is that even the people that drew the map knew very little about the area. It was not densely settled. There were not a lot of people in it, and in fact the reasons for settlement in 1598 from 1588 were military more than anything else. It was a time of religious division, and after the Spanish Armada, Catholic England became a great threat to Protestant England. Catholic Ireland became a great threat to Protestant England. If a foreign power, a Catholic power, like France or Spain, was to use Ireland as a base, then there was a strong possibility that they could invade and take over England. And it's for those secure reasons that what is broadly known as the plantations happened. We will return to them later. What sort of land did they come to when they arrived in Ireland, those first settlers? What did the settlers live on? Well, it was a heavily wooded area, an area that spoke Gaelic. The wood of the Ulster men. These trees would have been what people would have chiefly associated with the lifestyle. There had been settlement in the Lagan Valley from prehistoric times. Life would have been very difficult and very much based upon their local environment. There would have been wild boar, elk and wolves in the woods we look at now. But the local townlands names were based on trees. Budor, Buthdora, hut or cell of oak. Derryaki, oakfield. Ballynaskay, townland of the thorn bushes. Edenderry, hillbrow of the oakwood. So from these, it's quite apparent that life was based in the land. Language was geographical language derived from the land. Even the ancient trails through the forests of the Lagan Valley. Since earliest time, Stone Age man has ventured through the forests of South Antrim Hills on a journey to the other side of the valley across the Lagan River at different fording points. They have left behind traces of their journey and traces of their occupation sites where they lived for some time. There is evidence of early mining. Flint especially was very important to early settlement. Flint is the strongest natural settlement known to man. It would not be as useful to mankind in their development as bronze or iron, but it did grow naturally, and there are evidence of flint mines up on Ballygomartin Road, where the Quaker's house is, to the present day. The disposition of hill masses to the north suggest that the best and most convenient route from north to south would have been through or along the slopes of Colin Glen, of which the Colin area is today part, which is now part. As we moved from early man right through to the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, fording was made easier by the development of proper bridges. Today, Shaw's Bridge, or Drum Bridge here, would stand where once there was wooden bridges. But as time went on, development meant that woods were cleared and that settlements became more permanent. The struggle for existence of early Stone Age man up on the hills of the Black Mountain was given over as developments were made in the uses of bronze and iron to a more settled society where food could be grown, where there was less need to move. There is also, of course, evidence that a religious viewpoint came in. Early religion would have regarded as the deaths of important people in the clan or tribe as very important. One of the best examples is the Giant's Ring, a semi-circular earthwork bank about 11 foot high, at the centre of which is a small passage tomb. This Giant's Ring dates back to the Neolithic period, about 2000 years BC, and it appears to be a meeting place or as a place to honour the dead, but it is a strong indication of early settlement, early specific jobs to do, and not the moving about that which often characterised early Irish society. Some of the local materials they would have needed to exist in a settled society could be found in the nearby mountains, today the McQuillan's quarries. Lime, for example, would have made the land fertile when people came to grow food. Basalt was a very strong material for building or for construction of stone roads, both very important to the development of the area. We know that mining went on because in the Seymour Hill area, finds were made of flint tools and pork saddling axe heads. Near Balmoral Hotel, present Balmoral Hotel, food vessels were unearthed from a hearth site. So there was early settlements, but it was a struggle for survival. Around 600 BC, the climate deteriorated, and those habitations on the hilltops of the South Antrim were abandoned, and the people moved downslope to sites between 500 and 600 feet along the foothills. This was very, very important, of course. People living in high places found it easier to defend themselves against enemies. There was no structure of law and order. Defence was everything for the clan. So to come down from the hills had certain consequences. In order to feel safe, people built raths. These were circular structures, really ditches, circular ditches within which part or even sometimes all of the clan lived. 300 of these raths have been located, and they give their names to many settlements today. Rathmore, Rathcoole, all indicate a settlement which was defensive and really often prehistory. There is no written records of them. It is, I think, instructive that when Belfast started to become quite a large town, it was built with North Street was once a ditch, a fortified ditch, as in part of a rath. So the thinking of the early settlers never left them. Raths were seen as very, very important, and when we see a rath today, it is a fair indication that there was once a settlement here, as in Dunmurry in this case. Now, this is an indication in Irish terms from the Lindrick map of where there were settlements. We know from this, there's the woods of the Ulsterman, Kiltruck, that there were raths on them. We have located them. The next really big settlement moving forward, there had been settlements, and then pre-Christ, just in AD, there would have been around after the time of St. Patrick, starts of monastic settlements, Christianity. Now, it didn't make a lot of headway in the Lagan Valley. We have only found two important foundations for Christianity in the Dark Ages, really. One at Shankill, Dark Ages leading up to the Middle Ages, between about 500, certainly to 1300, and they are at Shankill and Knock. A few lesser church sites are linked with the trackways across the valley floor. We do know from papal tax records of 1315 that the mother church for Derryockie was on the Shankill Road. Then not a built-up area, but a small lane really, leading out toward Antrim. And St. Patrick's on the Shankill was the first church which we can locate as evidence of Christianity, with Knock also shortly after being a very important centre. There appears to be evidence under the jurisdiction of the church at Shankill to the present day. Belfast, and indeed Lisburn and Derryockie, were notoriously bad at keeping records of what went before. But here are two artists' impressions of Coleman's Widow Graveyard with a Ballan, old forged townland. Outside the present, there is still a Ballan stone to be found in the Shankill, right up beside the Shankill graveyard. And we have evidence too of monastic dwellings in the Colin area. This is Kilwee, the church of the dwarfs. Now, where it got its name from, I have no idea, but certainly the name stuck, Kilwee, and it is an important part of Colin now, and indeed there is a church still in that vicinity. Now, when things changed, just referring back to the old map, was at the dawn of the 17th century. I have said before, it became very, very important to try and make sure that for the English monarch's point of view, having went resolutely Protestant really under Elizabeth I, that there should not be a very disloyal Ireland. Ireland had stayed largely Catholic, it had been unaffected by the Reformation, and they had kept their language and their culture, much as they had done right up until the end of the 17th century, the end of the 16th century. Although theoretically Ireland had been under the control of the English crown from 1169, their interest in it had really waxed and waned. Many of the early Anglo-Irish settlers had adopted the mannerisms, modes of life, dress style and language of the native Irish. Therefore, when you get names like from the Anglo-Normans like Fitzmaurice or Fitzpatrick or Fitzgerald, they tend to reference Irish types of existence, although they had come over with the Anglo-Normans. The situation had definitely changed, however, by 1593, when an increasing Tudor influence was resisted in the 9 Years' War, 1594 really, because led by the O'Neills of the Hugh O'Neill of Tyrone, the O'Donnells, the Maguires, there was an attempt to move back to the old Irish mode of life. It wouldn't have been a Republican rebellion as we know it today, but rather an attempt to hold on to what both Anglo-Normans, that's the old Irish, and the native Irish regarded as their traditional way of life. It was a fairly savage war, it encompassed all of Ireland, and it was also a long war. For 9 years, Ireland was racked from front to back. In that time, Elizabeth the First, the last Tudor queen, died, and in 1603, just as the war came to an end, James Stuart James I of England and James VI of Scotland, one and the same man, had came to power. The war had effectively been won, but at great cost. And one of the first things James I did as a new monarch was to reward those soldiers who had made the victory in Ireland, or the Treaty of Malafont, bringing to the end of the war, those who had made it a success. One of them is the chap that you see in this picture here, Arthur Chichester. His brother had been St John Chichester, and he had been the governor of Carrickfergus, killed in the 9 Years' War, as a matter of fact. Chichester had a history as a soldier. He had fought against the Spanish Armada, and was certainly an able man. But he received a grant of the Castle of Belfast and an area comprising 52 townlands, and they extended from Dunmurry to the Lagan River and to the shores of Carrickfergus. From 1610, his followers took up land in the Malone district. And it is really with Arthur Chichester we have a couple of developments which were to change the face of the Colin area. The first was that the land was largely cleared of trees. This was for iron smelting, for to rebuild the English Navy, which had been depleted in the wars with the Spanish, particularly the Armada, and for domestic use, farming and so on, house building. Now, that would have changed the shape of it, what the land looked like, but there would have also been a change of settlement. Belfast itself was a very, very small area. In 1660, it is estimated that only 1,000 people lived in Belfast, huddled around the Farset River, what is now High Street, Ann Street, and perhaps Waring Street, Skipper Street. But it didn't extend much further than that. Similarly, the Conway family, Sir Fulk Conway, like Arthur Chichester, had fought on the English side. He was a Welsh knight in the 9 Years' War. He was rewarded lands around Lisburn. And the Conway family, who rather confusingly, over the next 100 years, as men left no male line and they intermarried with, the women intermarried with other people, could also be called the Seymours, the Herefords, and finally the Wallaces. All gave names to what we know today as Belfast and Lisburn. So when we think of Sir Arthur Chichester, who was the Earl of Donegal, we have Arthur Street, Chichester Street, Donegal Street east, west, north and south, Donegal Square, and the castle they built became Castle Street, Castle Junction, and so on. And the Conways too built a castle, so there's a Castle Street out in Lisburn, the markets which they set up, and they also brought in new settlers to make sure that there was some sort of loyalty to the Queen who had given them their land, Queen Elizabeth. So the area was to change very much, but it was to change at the start very, very slowly.